Pencil Kings, 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 Pencil Kings.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. You find something you like, you try to move in that direction, and if that doesn't pan out, don't be sentimental about it. Look for work elsewhere.
All right, so we are back. It's Pencil Kings podcast. It's Wednesday. It's time for another, I hope, uplifting, inspiring, exciting interview. And Diego, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and please use the Spanish pronunciation for your name with the rolled R's because I love hearing it. So why don't you introduce yourself and give us kind of a 1 or 2 minute overview of who you are and some of the things that you've done just to set us up for the conversation that we're going to have.
Okay, let's see. Well, the name is, with the Spanish pronunciation, that would be Diego Ricardo Jourdan Pereira.
Love it.
But if that's too long for you, you can just call me Diego or Diego Jourdan. That's fine too. Even Diego Pereira, because, Americans are also very literal about, the last name thing. So although my surname would be Jourdan, they usually use my mother's maiden name as my last name, so Pereira too. I've actually used the Diego Pereira's pen name when I draw cartoons for adult magazines like Hustler, but that's another story altogether. Let's see, I'm a professional illustrator, mainly. I write too. I work commercially for magazines and newspapers all over the world. I grew up in Uruguay and then immigrated to Chile with my family, where I've been living for the past 25 years. Let's see if I'm leaving anything out. No, I think that's basically it. I draw, I write, I travel. And I also listen to vinyl records, but also it's also something else altogether. So I don't know, what would you like to know?
So I think what would be really interesting to start to understand is obviously the U.S. is a very powerful market for entertainment, and they
sure
in some ways they're leading a lot of different things. But I think as artists, there's amazing artists all over the world. And what I'm curious about is, we've had people on the podcast from Iran and all over the place. And sometimes there's not a lot going on in your home country, or maybe there's not the kind of projects that you want to work on happening in your home country. And I'm really curious how you're able to expand outward, because it seems like a really difficult thing, even for me living in Canada.
Right.
Just that, even though Canada and the U.S. are very close, I mean, like we're right beside each other, but just even that divide seems a little bit hard to cross over for some people. But to go from Chile or France or wherever you are, how do you make a name for yourself and kind of get things going? Because I feel like getting started is the hardest part, and once you have a bit of a name, then things kind of snowball. And I'm curious how it worked for you.
Well, I think the name part is kind of relative. You see, the way I see it, you got to be a real pro. And that means that wherever you are and whoever you work for, you always follow their rules, not yours. So, and as far as I'm concerned, I mean, even as a child, as a kid, I used to like hang my drawings on my grandmother's fridge with these fridge-shaped magnets, because I wanted people to see my work. I never kept it for myself. I always wanted to, other people in the family to see what I was doing. And I remember just when I was about 5 years old, there used to be this dictatorship in Uruguay, and the country returned to democracy in '84, I think. And I remember the adults discussing the work of, there's a Uruguayan cartoonist called Aroxa. And I remember, being this just little boy thinking, man, if I could put my drawings in the newspaper, a lot more people are going to see them. So it was never my intent to become an artist with a capital A, like Picasso or Jackson Pollock or Hopper or Maynard Dixon or whoever. I wanted to be in the press, and I wanted to see my work in print. So, but here's the thing, you live in Uruguay or you live in Chile and not much goes on, and what does go on doesn't pay. So your only choice if you want to make a career out of it is looking elsewhere for work. I always joke with friends that if there was a newspaper or a comic book industry in Madagascar, I'd probably be there already. I've drawn for publishers in the Ukraine, in India, Argentina, Bolivia, of all places, even Mexico, well, of course, the US, and the United Kingdom, where I currently work. And it's just, you got to keep looking and you got to keep searching and knocking, just like the old Bible verse. But first, you got to be a real pro, and you got to know you don't make the rules of the field. It's like being a soccer player. You either play in the field and follow the rules that FIFA sets, or you're in the sidelines. So it's a decision you got to make. Being a professional cartoonist or an illustrator, you don't make the rules. So it's not about self-expression, but doing what the clients want.
And when you say the rules, Diego,
yeah,
what are some of the rules that you might have wanted to break, but you realized I can't do this if I want to continue? Or maybe you see other people breaking these rules and you're like, if you do that,
right,
you're going down a path that's going to not lead to where you want to get to. Just as to give the listeners, as well as for me, some concrete things.
Well, first of all, editors have a view of things, and they publish certain types of work. You can't go to a children's book editor and bring him the adult stuff I do for Hustler magazine. And you can't go to, a true crime publisher and bring him a children's novel. It doesn't work that way. I started out actually as an assistant to other illustrators. One of them was Mariano Ramos. He's an Argentinian illustrator living in Chile. And he taught me the following thing. First, and this is an advice that applies to pretty much everywhere. Despite, whatever we might think or like or wish to do, there's a reality that we cannot change. It's the reality we live in. So the first rule is we approach this reality with objectiveness. Like, say you want to illustrate books for children. You go to a bookshop, you see what's being published, who publishes it, what styles they publish. And then you go back home and try to do the same, which is what you present to these editors, what they do, not what you would like to do. So usually the first mistake is trying to push my own agenda or my own style. This is commercial work. These people do not care about you expressing yourself. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll find one that tells you to give it a go or have fun. But whenever it comes, when it comes down to professional work, to commercial work, it's what they want. And that's okay. That's the way illustration usually worked. Since like ever. Painters, Velázquez, classical painters, Caravaggio, they did not paint what they wanted to paint. They painted what they were paid to paint. And that's a big difference. So we have to accept the rules of the market and the industry and what it wants and adapt to it. Or else, and this is, it's not the wrong thing to do. If you want to be an artist and express yourself, go for it. Just be aware that you're probably never going to make a lot of money. So, and in my case, I'm just a working class cartoonist. I gotta pay for my rent, my bills. Most of the time, I cannot choose. When I want to be an artist, I'm a woodcut printmaker. So I go into the workshop and just gouge some wood blocks and make my own prints and have fun. But I don't delude myself thinking that I can sell these prints. I do that for fun. The commercial stuff is what pays my bills, so that's what I focus on most of the time. So it's important to be able to take a few steps back and assess reality as what it is, not as what we wish it would be. And this applies to, sure, it works in local markets. Say you live in Iran, you got to see what publishers in Iran actually publish and what they pay for. And you got to give them what they want. But say you live in Iran, for instance, and you want to work for a UK publisher, it's the same thing. And eventually, I don't think it's about reaching a certain point and then snowballing downwards. It's more like climbing up a mountain and reaching a point in your career where your talent and your reputation allows you to reach the top of the next mountain and so forth. But it's an industrial thing. It's not about fame. It's about being recognized as a hardworking professional who does what he or she is told. And that may be one of the hardest things for anybody. I mean, it's not like I cannot turn off the part of me that wants to express itself, but I realize that, my ego is not doing the work. I have to start from somewhere else. I have to solve other person's needs and other industries' needs. And that's tough. I mean, not a lot of people know how to adapt themselves to that.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. And I felt similar when I was going through university, that I went to a fine arts program, but I always knew that I didn't want to be a fine artist. I didn't I have stories inside of me or ideas and stuff, but I wanted to work on games. I wanted to be part of a bigger team, and I had no delusions about where my place was going to be. I was never going to be famous. I was never going to be. I was a worker, I looked at myself as a craftsman. Really, that somebody said once that if you go to the Colosseum in Rome, in Italy, and you look, and there's all these amazing sculptures all over the place. These are all now basically nameless artists that were craftspeople at the time, and they were just making this stuff.
Well, yeah, I actually been to the Colosseum in October. I don't remember any sculptures there, but Rome's full of them in any case. And you're right. Artists in ancient times did not aspire to fame. Some may have achieved that fame, and fame is all right if it comes, but if it doesn't, you still got to pay your bills. You still got to make a living. And you cannot delude yourself with, I don't know, thinking you're going to rule the world. We're servants. No, it's important. I just told you about this little book I published in Chile. It's called In the Service of International Comics. It's about, small work like inking or coloring or technical stuff. And you do that stuff when you actually, to do that, you got to put yourself in the service of a given industry. So you're not working for yourself, you're working for someone else. And that cannot be avoided. I mean, Caravaggio couldn't avoid it. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And the rest just works itself out.
Okay, so I love that you brought up the point of, if you want to do work for a certain, let's say children's books, you go to the bookstore, you look at what's selling, who those publishers are, take that stuff back home.
Or the internet, it's okay too.
And then try and create work that's of that quality, and then contacting these people. But is it as simple as that? Like, how many, let's say you've been doing focusing on newspaper illustration, and now you want to change things up for yourself. Yeah. You can do it, and you want to get into children's books. You go and collect the books that you think are cool.
Right.
How many pieces would you create, and then how would you contact these publishers? Would it be like a short email and some pictures? Would it be a short email and no pictures? Would it be social media? Yeah.
Well, those are good questions. Let me just start by saying that, as anybody who's worked in animation knows, simple and easy are two different things. Often what seems simple is not easy at all. It takes time. It takes effort. Mariano Ramos, this illustrator I used to apprentice with, and the whole apprenticeship structure has completely vanished the world over. It's sad, but well, I'm glad I had the chance to do that. He used to say that it takes you about a decade before you reach a competitive level that allows you to, make a living and actually do what you set out to do. But going back to these questions you have. Let's see. First, I'd say a short email and a link to a website. That's, goes without saying. Don't pester your editor or your prospective client any more than you should. What I have found is that when an editor wants to give you work, they'll give you the work. Otherwise, do not waste time if you don't get a response. Just move on, look for another one, and so forth. The advantage of working for American publishers, for instance, is like you get hundreds of them. So it's a huge tree. Eventually, if you shake it hard enough, one of the apples is bound to fall. So you got to keep trying and searching and knocking on doors. I remember, like you said, I started out as drawing comic books. First for small Chilean publishers. I also used to work for a newspaper here called El Mercurio as an illustrator. But at first, I really wanted to do comic books. So I started sending samples to American publishers with no success whatsoever. And then one day I met this writer called Matt Starnes. He was an independent guy who wanted to start out and write his own stories and get someone to illustrate them. And I started to illustrate these stories for him. And I'd say that's when the proverbial snowball started rolling for me, because I was able to build from there. And I started to show my work to bigger publishers and other writers and getting other jobs. And it was actually pretty nice. The problem is that I'd say about 10 years into it, I realized there's something Stephen Pressfield calls the personal imperative. And the imperative of this comic book industry, it's basically we'll do anything for the fan, or for fandom, or for the fan crowd, or whatever it is you call them. And honestly, that's not my personal imperative. I try to find things that, common ground and still do what I was asked to do. But I couldn't care less about fans. As a readership of my work, I wanted my work to reach a wider audience. So I started to look into other opportunities. And it occurred to me that maybe my work, since I actually had, drawing comic books, got me to a point where I was pretty slick at, line art. So I sent this short email and a link to my website to Dover Publications. They do coloring books and activity books for children at the time. And about 6 months later, I hear back from the children's department editor at the time, Jason Schneider, and he offered me work. So I just went into that direction. I didn't quite get away from comics completely, because I also at that time I started working for a publisher in the United Kingdom called DC Thomson. It's a pretty old publisher. I mean, the first issue of the oldest magazine they published, its first issue is from 1736 or something. So they've been at this game for a long time. But the difference is they don't do superheroes. They do magazines for kids. And they're actually read by real kids. I'm sure they have fans too and collectors, but that's not their core audience. Their audience is actual children. So I also started working for this publisher in the UK. And a few years later, I got this job for an Indian publisher called Amar Chitrakatha. It's ACK Media now. They publish a children's magazine called Tinkle, which apparently is very, very popular in India. Yeah, I know. The name draws a smirk on me too, but anyhow. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You find something you like, you try to move in that direction, and if that doesn't pan out, don't be sentimental about it. Look for work elsewhere. I'm
curious about the relationship with the writer, because that came up, believe it or not, in the last podcast that we did, where we were talking about how somebody who wants to create a comic that takes so much time to develop that visual skill that it also takes so much time to develop proper writing skills. It might be because we're visual artists, we feel like writing's easy. I can write, and yeah, anybody can open Word and type some stuff, but it's an art all in itself. And the team-ups can be so strong. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that initial team-up, how it came about, and because I think there's a lot of power there that when we start working together, it's not like 1 + 1 is 2. It's like 1 + 1 is 5. I'm sure things were much better for the writer because you were helping him out, and things were much better for you. And it just like everything happened after that.
Well, yeah. You see, it's always about teamwork when you work, for the commercial media or for the publishing world or whatever. It could be a writer, it could be an editor when you do coloring books. You don't work with a writer, but you do work with an editor that kind of points you in the right direction. Say if Jason needs a specific type of work, he's going to tell me, look, can you do it like this? And I'll go, let me see what I can do. And get back to him with some samples, which most of the time he'll shoot down until I get it right. But that kind of collaboration enriches the whole process. And as for working with writers, I think most of the time it can do really well if both are easy to adapt, and keen on adapting to each other's strengths. Like, I don't know, Matt. I would tell Matt, hey, I want to do a story like this and that, featuring this and that, and he would write it for me. And at the same time, he would tell me, hey, I have this idea for a character. Maybe he's wearing this or that, and I would try to accommodate his needs also. I think it's good preliminary training to work with an independent writer that, when you're starting out, because it's really the training ground that you need to further develop your skills as an artist. But like you said, writing is also its own craft, and it takes time and dedication. I've learned it, by basically becoming a writer myself lately. And I'll be honest with you, I'm no Stephen King. I write small nonfiction books about the craft that I already do, which is, illustration and drawing and cartooning. But anyhow, yeah, it's my God, writing it can be such a hard time. Maybe a few weeks ago, I saw this old interview of Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese movie director of Rashomon, and you've probably seen some of his films, and super famous. And in this interview, he mentions that he got a lot of young people asking him how to start as a filmmaker, and he would tell them that the easiest thing to do would be to get get somewhere to write on and a pencil and just write the damn movie. And it can't be any cheaper. Making a film is expensive, but you can start by writing the stories you want to write. And by thinking about the storytelling process and refining it, you'll be a better filmmaker. Just like, I don't know, any artist who works digitally will be better at it if he actually draws, and sketches and does other stuff than just staying on the computer all the time. The process enriches itself and feeds itself all the time. So, I don't know. I go to a lot of art exhibitions, and I like modern art a lot. But and it informs my own process, and it enriches me, and it allows me to do things better and to keep the ideas fresh. So it's all important, and it's all part of the whole creative process.
Just in talking with you, I get this feeling that your success has come easy, and I think easy is the wrong word. Like, you work really hard for it, but you have this calm about yourself that you have. Maybe it's just confidence that things will happen. And I'm wondering if there's things that you see you do different. Maybe it's like shaking the tree more than other people. Maybe it's going to art exhibitions and connecting with more people or collaborating more. Is there something like that you feel like you're different than other people?
Well, not quite. I think it's all part of the job. I think everyone who wants to do this and do this professionally has to do these things. It's not something that I came up with myself. It's I basically learned from older professionals, both as their assistant and as their friend. And then I took what they taught me and made it my own and started applying it to my own career. I don't think there's anything that I do differently. Maybe, I don't know. And it's hard because, sure, you can see me confident in whatever. And honestly, this, drawing is my territory. So yeah, I'm confident about my craft and the way I do it. I know I'm a professional. I've been at this for 20 years. But I would lie to you if I told you I'm always this confident. And that sometimes I don't fear if I'm going to make ends meet. Or if, I don't know, work will come in one form or another. What will happen with, I don't know, the Brexit or whatever, what this will mean for me. I'm just a regular human being with fears, with an ego. I try not to mix the ego with the craft. Maybe that's something I do differently. Some people, the ego is like the fuel, but I think it hinders work because you cannot rely. I mean, the work needs to come from somewhere higher than the ego, and it needs to come from craft and from doing. Doing motivates me. Looking at myself in the mirror does not. So ego, not understood in the Freudian sense, but, this delusion of self-importance or whatever. Like I said, we're servants, so that's about it. Should recognition come? Great. But I'm not looking for the cure of Alzheimer's either.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's I always tell people I'm like a plumber or a stonemason. It's no different. I sit down every day, I get the job done. Sometimes, like everyone else, I get tired. I suffer from self-doubt, you name it. Up until recently, I had been working for a German publisher drawing Lego comics. Lego, the toy franchise. Yeah. And, for the first time in, I don't know, maybe a decade, I felt completely overwhelmed, physically overwhelmed by the amount of hours I had to put into the work. And I'm a human being. I mean, I can work 8 hours a day, maybe 10 hours a day, maybe, God forbid, 12 hours a day. But at 40, I'm going to turn 40 this year. So at 40, I cannot work 18 hours a day like I was working with Lego. So I had to quit. But then again, I'm a freelancer. And quitting means, I cannot tell you the fear it poses. Of course, I don't have, my table doesn't have just one leg. It has 4. And I try to keep it that way. But losing one of the legs, it's quite a thing. You've got to be very careful about how you do things. And most of these publishers and advertising agencies and whatever, you say no to them once, they'll never call you back. So it's a frightful thing to do. But I don't know. I came face to face with my own physical limitations. I have high blood pressure. I stress easily. I suffer lumbago. That's lower back pain like you wouldn't believe. Fortunately, I go to the gym, but this job, it gets to you eventually. So you gotta, along the way, you gotta find those places where you're most comfortable working, and you gotta find work that doesn't do you harm, as in working 16 or 18 hours a day. I was in Japan in 2015, learning the Japanese technique for woodblock printmaking. They call mokuhanga. So, and I learned there. I went with a friend. She took me to this museum, the Fujio Museum. That's the creator of Doraemon. It's a huge cartoon franchise in Japan. It's got animation and manga and whatever. The museum was awesome, but I remember in the last part of the whole tour, they take you to this lifeline, and the tour guide said, without a hint of irony, and the Japanese can be ironic, but in this case it was just being absolutely matter of fact. She said that Fujio was blessed with a long life. He lived, I think he died at 89 or 90 or something like that. And she said that he had been blessed because usually manga artists do not live very long.
Really?
Yeah, and talking to other Japanese, illustrators and printmakers and people I just met along the way, they all confirmed this. They told me, yeah, they usually live until 40, 50. So
what?
Yeah. So, because we're talking about these guys, I mean, they can work 18 hours a day, 24 hours a day. Sometimes they can spend 5 years without a single day off. They're like drawing machines. And I realized, cause I had also been assisting. I had also been an assistant to a Donald Duck comics artist in Chile called Victor Arriagada. He signed as Bicker. That was his pen name. And I saw this 76-year-old man sit down at his desk at 8 in the morning and work until 11 p.m. And he was 76. He was strong like a bull, but still, And I would think to myself, geez, if I had to be him, I'm gonna shoot myself. So yeah, and these industries, they leave off the blood of people like me or him or whatever. Vicar only stopped drawing when he got leukemia, so go figure. And he was also blessed with a long life. It's you never hear from the people that are left along the way. So as a professional, I also have to think about my own well-being. I got to think about saving for retirement. I got to think about many things that an adult man thinks. But sometimes when you start out, you don't think about those things. You just want to be an artist. You want to draw. You want to have fun. You think that, I don't know, drawing superheroes is going to be great. Believe me, it isn't. That's one of the reasons I started working on, the cartoony franchises like Astro Boy or Regular Show or whatever, or Lego. Disney too. But I never quite managed to do it as, to be as strong as my old friend who passed away from leukemia. It's still, you got to think about those things. Those things are part of what being professional also means.
I found it kind of shocking because I came from video games where the average age is 32, I think, from the industry survey that I read, was when people start falling out of that industry. You want to have a family and you can't work as much anymore because now you got to take care of your family and it's hard to keep up. The kids coming out of school are so fast, and I didn't realize what this meant. I'm 36 now, and I'm starting to see now how fast some of these kids think. It's not just in art; it's in everything. They're cycling things so fast. And I used to be that kid when I was 20.
Yeah.
And I only now realize it's like, whoa, I'm starting to get on the other side of that curve. But the thing that shocked me is when I went to the Emerald City Comic Con and I saw some of these artists that I appreciate, these graphic artists, and the wrist things that they had and the back braces and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, what is happening here? Like I in my mind, these artists are like superheroes themselves, right?
Right.
And you meet these people and you realize, oh, they're just real people and they're really often so nice. But then you see these braces and things, and you're just like, oh my gosh, is this what we want to aspire to? Is this what it takes?
The thing is, they love what they do, and that's what the industry uses against them. The comic book industry has always been like this giant predator. I remember actually, one of the first, let's call it mainstream comic book gigs that I got was drawing these bucket comics for Steve Niles. He used to write Hellspawn and whatever. And I remember when he gave me the job, basically, and he said, welcome to the meat grinder, because that's what it is. So, and not a lot of people can handle it for a long time. I mean, eventually you got to start thinking differently. And that's a good thing too, But here's the thing. There are so many artists these days. Every week I see maybe 10 new artists, and they're all 10 years younger than myself, 10 times more talented. So I have to learn to play to my own advantages, say my reputation, say that I'm able to sacrifice my ego to get the work done, other things. That's part of growing up too. But I won't be able to stay in the same game forever. I already haven't. I've adapted and went on to do other things. So I don't know. There's no prescription for it. It's just the way life works. Eventually, I mean, even myself, I want to have a family and kids, and I want to be able to feed them well. But these predatory industries, some of them, not all, children's books are great, actually. They give you contracts and they pay you in advance. But comic books kind of inherited all the old Great Depression vices, and they all expect you to basically work for free or close to it. So fortunately, I'm not that emotional. I've turned down gigs to draw Scooby-Doo and to ink Dr. Fate, I think it was called. It's some sort of like Doctor Strange, but from another publisher. And I couldn't care less. I mean, they told me how much they paid, and I went like, what? Really? But, I can go back to inking Donald Duck anytime and make 3 times what you're offering me. So, yeah, that's me. I don't think you can be in the arena and the sidelines at the same time. And it's also not healthy. At some point, we're going to make a decision about the kind of life we want to lead and how we want to live it. So I decided to diversify, to do other things. That's what's kept me well fed all these years.
Yeah, and I wanted to, we're almost at the end, but I wanted to spend some time talking about the book that you've just written, because you'd said it,
Sure.
You drew a comparison to the War of Art? Art of War?
No,
War of Art.
The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, yeah.
But for the Spanish market and for the Chilean market. And can you just tell us about that? Because I know we have listeners in Mexico and all over the world, and I feel like other languages often don't get the same attention necessarily, or maybe it's harder to find. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's great when you can read something in your own language and you don't have to try and translate things from your brain and what you're reading on the page.
Absolutely. Well, you see, I read a lot of professional motivational literature that's out there in English, obviously, and I found it's pretty common in the U.S., especially for writers. In both digital and print formats, you can find books about how to write this or that, or how to draw whatever, or how to make it in this or that industry. And but that's actually pretty rare south of the border, like I was telling you. You don't find that in bookstores. At least it's not so common. And I'm told my book is like a first for the Chilean market. And apparently in the last few years, actually there's been like this huge boost in graphic novel publishing here. I'm not saying anybody's getting super rich, but there's stuff being done, and yet nobody's talking about the facts of the craft itself, and nobody's telling. I mean, since the whole apprenticeship structure faded away in the 20th century, young artists just didn't know what to do or where to go. I mean, they're completely lost. And since there are no books like The War of Art by Pressfield or any other, things are even worse in that respect. And unless they're prepared, unless they know what to expect, the local meat grinder is going to crush them too. Not to talk about, the bigger markets and whatever. So we didn't get to talk about this, but I dropped out of college back in 2000. Basically due to, family and financial reasons. I couldn't afford college anymore. And I dropped out and I just kept on working as an illustrator. Fortunately, an illustrator is like a football player. You don't need a diploma to do it.
Right.
I don't go to this coach and tell him, hey, look, this is my ball playing diploma. He's going to tell me, hey, go play. So essentially, I just kept on working professionally as an illustrator, which I had been doing before entering college. And but this year, must have been my midlife crisis or sorts. But the thing is, I decided to go back to college and get that freaking degree. It had been nagging me for some time, and the experience in Japan learning, woodcut printmaking was so good that I thought I need to invest in my own education. So I went back to study graphic design, and my graphic design project is actually this book. I wrote it, and I illustrated, and I designed it, actually with the help of another designer, and then I got it published, which was, to be honest, was the easy part. People think that getting published is like rocket science. It's not. It's super easy. What's hard is, getting paid for the work. That's the hard part. But getting published, a one-eyed monkey with implants in his brain can do it. Anybody can, and a hand tied to the back. So, yeah, I got this book off the ground. It's called In the Service of International Comics. There you go. I'll send you the PDF anyway. And I was told it's the first in Chile. And of course, this is a niche market. I don't expect to get Stephen King sales in any way, and that's all right. I just if the people that are interested in it want to read it, that's payment enough for me. And I'm guessing early this year it will be published by an Argentinian publisher also. So I don't know. It's been quite a ride, you know. And I actually just finished the manuscript for the second book, which is also due in the middle of 2017. So.
And you know, we're audio only for the podcast, so people can't see. You're holding the book up for me. But one of the things that I like is that it looks like a nice, short, easy to read book.
Absolutely.
Like very, very straightforward. And because I've heard that the reason why books are often 300 pages is because that's what they figured out sells. Right. So they'll put in all this extra stuff into it, and I hate reading all that fluff. I just want to know like the meat, or I want a nice short story. Some of my favorite books are like very, very short and sweet, and it's not as small as I would call it short and sweet, but it looks like very digestible.
Yeah, well, it's actually what Americans call digest format, A6. You know, the Japanese call it bunkobon. It's basically a pocketbook, and I designed it so people could like literally bring it anywhere and read it maybe in the subway. So it's 100 pages long. I just cut all the fluff out, like you say. Yeah, the first part of the book is about looking for the work, finding the work, and then doing the work. And that all comes from my own experience, you know, like what editors want, how to please them, and how to do the job right. And then the second part is where I explain what I do. This book focuses on technical services only. I left out all my experience as an illustrator, draftsman, and I focused on the technical services that I sometimes offer, like inking or coloring and restoration too. That's also a venue of work that I've developed recently. It's basically restoration of art for books that are, you know, to reprint comic books and whatnot. So yeah, it's a digest. It's easy to read and it's short. Because the rest of the time, I hope people will be drawing and doing something about things. Nice.
Well, we should wrap up here, Diego. Where's the best place for people to find you online? And I feel like I know we have members inside the Pencil Kings community from Mexico. If somebody in another Spanish-speaking country, because there's a lot, can they get your book, or where could they find it? Because I feel like it's applicable to any artist, and it would be great to read in your native language rather than in English and trying to translate it.
Sure. Well, I have a website. I used to have my own .com, but now I closed it down and just went on to use Strikingly, which offers a very nice service. It's called diegojordanpro.strikingly.com. And in it, you'll find my resume, my blog, my Twitter, a link to my Twitter, and also a big blue button that says buy my book. That will direct you to the publisher website when you can actually purchase it from overseas, and you know it will be shipped to you.
Perfect.
Oh yeah. And on a further note, like I mentioned, the book will be published in Argentina also. It will be a bigger format because it has to fit a collection that this publisher has of how-to books and whatnot. Eventually, you'll be able to publish like either one of those editions. So don't worry, it won't run out or anything. It's a small print run, but you'll be able to find it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Diego, for sharing all this. I think it was really, like I was saying before, just the confidence that you have in yourself and in the ideas about taking the ego out of it. I think it's so powerful. And if you're listening and, you know, you can start to ask yourself how that sits. Like, are you creating your work? Is it full of your own ego and you're trying to be self-important, or you think that you're somehow, by doing the work, you're going to get fame or something? Really ask yourself if that's necessary, because it could be one of the biggest things holding you back from getting, you know, just taking that emotion out of it, and you just say, no, I'm a professional. Just like a plumber's a professional plumber, just like an engineer's an engineer, an artist is an artist, or an illustrator is an illustrator, or a draftsman is a draftsman, but just do it.
Right on.
Thanks, Diego.
Okay, take care. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, one last note before I forget. As usual, if you want the show notes, we'll have a link to Diego's website, as well as some other write-ups over at pencilkings.com/podcast. Thanks, Diego.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
You talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.